Hey, welcome back to the Golden Spoon Podcast. I'm McCall,
And I'm Jeremy.
and today we have a very special guest out from Washington, Shannon MacFarlane. She is a photographer who has overcome some things and found some things through photography. And I'd like, and I know Jeremy would like her to share her story and how photography helped with depression and ADHD. And I think she talks about masking as well. So, Shannon, are you there?
I am, and I'm going to try to match the quality of your radio voice.
Thank you. It's fantastic to hear from you. We had a little conversation before, but if you would like to start off wherever you would like and go from there, we'll have open conversation and yeah.
Okay, well, I'll tell you my brain stuff first,
Yeah.
because I think that's the whole point of the conversation. I have been anxious, clinically anxious, for as long as I can remember. Like when I was a kid, I was just clinically anxious. I didn't know that's what it was. I thought that's just how I was and how people were in general. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized, oh, this isn't, no, this is not how it's supposed to be.
Right.
Now, is that like anxiety is in a sense of just not being wanting to sit still that much as a child, or was there like, sweaty palms and fear of going places and like big crowds and stuff like that?
Yeah, dread, panic attacks, things like changes in my vision. I have general anxiety disorder. I also have social anxiety. I have anxiety in pretty much any way you can have anxiety. And I appreciate all of the good things that anxiety does. And now that I'm older and I can learn more about it and learn how to be with my anxiety instead of trying to fight against it, I like the things that I can do with it. And it's really difficult to get to that place where it doesn't feel like I'm fighting against it. And that's what most of my life was like, is when I got into young adulthood and I got a diagnosis for the first time, there was a lot of, well, you need to do these things to heal yourself and to show your anxiety who's boss and things like that. And I don't work that way. I never have. That line of thinking doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And so it's this interesting thing where I'm an anxious person, and when I go to receive mental health care, I wind up feeling more anxious a lot of the time, because the way that I'm told that I should be doing things creates additional anxiety. And there's a huge bit of that. I could go on and on about particular schools of psychology and the techniques that they use for certain kinds of mental health conditions, and how sometimes for certain populations of people, they wind up doing more damage than have benefit. And that's certainly been the case for me. I've cycled through some clinical depression in my life. The root of all of this is that I am autistic and an ADHDer. And so built in with both of those things, there's this constant, I'm speaking for myself. There's a pretty pervasive feeling of not doing things well enough, of not being able to fit in, of just not feeling like an alien, like I don't belong because I'm so different, and I can work to look like I belong, but I know that I don't. And so I have this thing always going in my mind, running in the background about, well, if they find out what I'm really like, then all of these things are going to change. And so, it's only in adulthood that I've realized, oh, well, my anxiety comes from that. I may be just a generally anxious person, but a big part of why I'm generally anxious is because I'm always waiting to be discovered as a fraud, or being told that I need to adjust something because I'm not fitting a particular expectation or a social norm. And it's a difficult existence to do that. And a lot of the psychological tools that are available through therapy are more along the lines of cognitive behavioral therapy, which for me feels like very polite gaslighting.
That is awesome. I love that.
Very polite gaslighting.
Change the thinking about this, and then that will change the way that you're feeling. And I want to say expletive, expletive, expletive. No, that's not what this is about. I mean,
Basically, yeah.
a big thing. But yeah, I have a lot of concerns with CBT, and especially when it comes to using that in populations that are already marginalized for other reasons. It's kind of a brutal approach for most people. But so that's me. That's my brain stuff.
In a nutshell. So basically from what I got out of that, especially through like adulthood or, beginning in adulthood, when you're trying to basically find yourself, it was almost in a sense of constantly living in a middle school class of like having to try to fit into everybody's social norm and all their cliques and groups of what was going on. And always, like you said, like always feeling like you were never able to fit in, and then you're going to get discovered, and then everyone's going to find out who you were and just start pointing and laughing, basically.
Yeah, and I think that is such a typical neurodivergent experience, no matter what the divergence is. It's OCD or Tourette or autism or depression. We don't fake being unwell or having a hard time. We're faking being able to be functional in the way that other people define functional.
Yeah.
And it takes an enormous amount of brain power to be able to do that.
That's basically, I was talking to someone at my daytime job about depression and everything, because unfortunately he just lost someone that was close to him. And I was basically saying, it's the people that seem like they have it all together. The ones that are always smiling, the ones that are always joking. Those are the ones that you really have to pay attention to and ask, every other day if they're doing okay. Because the ones that are showing their sadness and depression are okay. Like they're okay with their emotions and then expressing it outward, and they're okay being judged and they're fine with it. But it's the ones that's bottling it in and hiding behind that curtain every day. And like you said, that is just twice as exhausting as just being open with your depression and being sad all the time, is having to put that mask on every day and just letting everybody know, hey, I'm fine, don't check on me, don't figure out what's behind the curtain.
Yeah. And with grief in particular, I find that grievers will often do the heavy masking because dealing with their grief is hard enough, but then dealing with someone else's grief over their own grief is too much.
Yeah.
And so they would rather pretend that everything is fine, so they're not also managing or being drawn into managing the emotional lives of other people, because then it starts in with people spill their own stuff to a griever, which is inappropriate in almost every circumstance. And then that person has their own emotional stuff happening, their own processing of all of the adjustments that need to happen in their lives that they're still trying to figure out. And then here comes a coworker or a friend or a family member that is putting all of this other stuff on and adding pressure about how I'm feeling sad that you're feeling sad, and I wish I thing, and it's just it's too much,
which in turn is going to make them more sad, because then they feel sad for making that person sad.
It just adds the weight. It's like, oh, they're sad, so now I have to be extra sad because, oh my Lord, they're sad.
More sad.
Yeah, they're more sad, and like, oh, I can't deal with that. That baggage is too much. So guess what? I have this nifty little tool. I'm gonna mask this. I'm gonna all right, here we go. I'm gonna just slide that over. I'm fine. We're good. Yeah.
This stuff is tidy because that's what people want to see anyway.
Yeah. People I wish were more open and honest about how they felt. Because
Hmm.
then, I've had plenty of situations where people were not open and honest with me, and they were putting on something to save face or, save me from any hurt or anything like that. And I'm like, just be completely honest with me. I would so much rather you tell me, this is just an example, on a date, like, that, you're not into me and, like, we don't have to go there, or, you don't have to spend that money on me. I would just like to be your friend or something, Don't put that mask up and be like, oh, yeah, you're so great and all this, and then never text me back, or, those masks just get in the way.
Yeah.
I want pure honesty. Like,
No one
just,
ever wants to be labeled as the bad guy, but in reality, you're being the better guy by, not masking and telling your true feelings to the person.
Yeah, when it's safe to do so, because
Yes.
yeah.
a lot of
Yes.
it's not, and that's how we get drawn into it. It's really unfortunate. We lack, as a culture, we lack a lot of the skills that we need to provide community care to people, to just be responsive human beings that care and can openly care and demonstrate that care of someone else.
Perfectly said.
Everything covered up. And I think that if we could be more open with that, if we could be less concerned about how people might perceive us, or, the idea that being emotive is a weakness, we would do a whole lot better. And we would certainly have a better go at doing things like addressing suicide,
Oh, yeah.
because it's because we tell people that their problems aren't worth talking about, that they should be dealing with that stuff privately, quietly, and quickly.
Yeah, we have a little
And
slogan on the Golden Spoon podcast, and I mean, I know it's nothing we create. I've heard it before, but we basically tell people it's okay not to be okay. You're not going to lose your job for being sad. Go to someone, even if you got to do it on your break, so you don't, make your boss mad or something. But pull them to the side and be like, "Hey, man, I'm here. Just, let it out. Just be open about it." Like you said, I mean, there's boundaries too involved. Don't sit there and pry on them and try to get it out of them, because they're going to try to close up even more. But just them knowing that there's that one person that they have to turn to when things start going bad, and just letting somebody know that it's it's okay not to be okay, is, to me, is comforting in itself. Like, hey, we're all going through this. It's the same thing. People experience death. People have someone close to them that's committed suicide. There's advice that you don't have to be a professional, and like you said, you don't have to do it in private to get the help that you need.
right, yeah, it needs to be more of something that we include as part of life, instead of this thing that we don't talk about and we don't allow anyone to witness. And that witness piece is, I think, what I really like about photography for me, is that when I feel like I'm not being witnessed by someone else, and that I'm really craving that, I want that connection, photography helps me create a little bit of that, because I can witness the things that are happening in my life, and then I can go back and look at them in whatever timeline I need, and I have all of the time that I need to process what is in that image. So, real life goes by pretty quickly, and our brains are processing so many pieces of information every second that there isn't enough time to soak everything in. But with photographs, we do have that ability. We can document things as they're happening. And then, as a mental health matter, we can go back and revisit that stuff and take the time that we need to pay attention to what was there and who was there.
I really appreciate that. What with photography, you're bridging that gap. If you're not getting, things that you're wanting, you're being able to bridge that gap and, like, get that, whatever it may be, attention, serotonin, remembrance of things. You're able to visually see people reacting with the photos you take. You're able to see people that were there in that moment for you. You're able to feel hopefully when I look, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I look at a photograph or something that I took, I allow myself to go back to that place and be like, ah, yes, I was at peace at that moment. I felt this
Mm-hmm.
way. I could smell the flowers and hear all the little sounds of the squirrels and the water trickling by and a fish jumping out of the stream and all the butterflies that I saw, just able to visualize and feel all those things all at once while looking at something, a photo that I took.
Yeah, it wakes up your brain a little bit because people, I know I have this experience where I'm just cognitively tired a lot of the time because I'm doing all this other stuff like masking, trying to pretend that I'm all right when I'm just trying to figure out how to be a person, right?
Right.
Um,
I think
yeah,
everybody is just trying to figure out how to be a person.
I was gonna say you're having to do it and do all the energy on masking. For me, it's mirroring. I'm constantly giving back the person. Like I get that all the time. It's like, man, I love talking to you. You're such a great person. You're so easy to talk to. And I mean, I don't want to tell them to their face. I'm like, well, you're basically talking to yourself because I'm just going to give you back to whatever you're giving me. I don't know if it's just
yep.
like trauma experience or whatever, coping mechanisms. I can't really train myself out of it, especially with new people. I just immediately give back the same thing that they're doing. And it is exhausting. By the end of the day, it's like I have to refine myself every day sometimes.
Yeah. And when you're expending all of that energy just to get through the day, never mind when something really big happens in your life that requires extra effort. But you can't have the same recall of stuff. Like neurologically, it's not possible because your brain is stressed. And even though you might have created the memory and put it somewhere, you have trouble recalling it because there's just too much stress. It's like white noise in the background. And photographs can really help people that way. And the things that you think that you may not have kept in your brain, the things that you think have passed you by, that you wish that you've remembered, but you feel like you don't. If a photograph is placed in front of you and you have a little bit of time to be with that photograph, all kinds of things start coming back because they never really left your brain. It's just that you have to be relaxed enough to be able to go to the librarian in your brain and say, hey, I'm looking for this book. And the librarian says, oh, yes, I know where that is. I can show you. Whereas otherwise, you walk into the brain library and it's just chaos. There's stuff all over the floor. It's like a big box store on Black Friday. It's just chaos.
And you don't have your library card. That's what happens to me half the time.
Cards, you can't take anything with you. Yeah, exactly. But the photographs kind of help with that. They help organize things. And for me, that helps to take some of the pressure off. So I don't feel like I have to catalog everything in my brain because I'm really, really bad about that I'll look around and I think, oh, this is important. I got to remember this. Oh my gosh, this is so important. I definitely need to remember that.
Yeah.
And I can't. So if I get to that point, I know, oh, I definitely need to pull out my phone because it sounds like this needs a photograph or two. But ideally, I've started doing some a little bit in advance of that so I can cover things without getting quite so worked up about it. And then it could be 6 months later, 3 years later, I can go back to the photographs and just sit with them and think, oh yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm ready to be with that part of it. And maybe it's not stuff that I'm going to keep, but for me, the processing part is really important because it helps me understand who I am and my perspective and how I process and see things. And as a person with a very different brain than what is normal, I get really confused about how I'm supposed to be doing that. So I have to stop listening to what's being prescribed to me by people that don't know what it's like to be me, and then just start listening to myself and following along with the ways that I naturally perceive stuff, and just pulling out my phone with that camera really helps me.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, and also like how you described your brain. It's a library. I like to think of my brain as a large storage indoor cooled storage container unit. And sometimes I have all my keys right there on my side with everyone labeled and everything. And sometimes I forget my keys at home and have no keys to open the locks to all these containers on the inside. And I'm like, oh, well, looks like I got to go back.
Or you have keys, but shocker, they're not labeled.
Yeah. Or that. I'm like, oh, I'm sitting here at this locker trying every one. I need to get into this one.
Yep. And it's so frustrating. It makes everything else harder. And that we have access to tools. Almost everybody I know has a phone that has a camera. I mean, when I started doing this, it was before phone cameras were really a big thing. So I was lugging around big SLR cameras.
Yeah, I have my big DSLR camera, so yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's enough for me, but as the technology has become more accessible for people, it's just so much easier. I don't have to plan for doing like a walkabout sort of situation with a bag of gear and whatnot. I can just go out into the world as I normally would, and I have this nifty little thing in my bag that I can pull out that's going to help me just process. It's sort of like a second brain or a brain boost for me, where I can put stuff in it and then pick it up later.
Yeah, technology is, we always have this talk of like the bad things versus the good things of technology and social media and stuff like that. And, you know, a phone, at least I perceive my phone as a tool to use. You know, sure, I have like fun with my phone. I have apps and other stuff on my phone, but it's a tool for me to use so that I can pull things back from that phone and be like, all right, there's that note, or there's that text message that I sent somebody, or there's that screenshot of my password that I probably shouldn't have screenshotted, but hey, I have it.
I'll do it all the time. People have something written down on a piece of paper and they're like, hey, can you remember this for me? And I just like grab the wrist and said, hold tight.
Nope.
And then I pull my phone out and I'll take a picture of it and say, what are you doing? And I'm like, I can remember it now. And they said, oh man, that's a good idea. I said, yeah, we have a camera in our pockets, so let's use it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what it's for. And with the brain stuff, we're already under so much pressure. And if we can use the tools that we already have access to in ways that help us, I mean, that's what they're for. And we don't all have to use them in the same ways. There's no reasonable expectations around that. It's just doing what works for you. So what I try to introduce people to is just to show them that photography is going to teach you a whole lot about who you are, the things that you feel like maybe you can't explain or get in touch with. When you create the next 500 images of whatever it is that you're photographing, and you go back and you look through those, you're going to start to see some patterns. You're going to start to see that there are ways that you tend to approach things, that there are particular subjects that you find especially interesting, and that you might be arranging those in the frame in similar ways every time. And if you stop and you think about that a little bit, it can help you get in touch with maybe some of your values, or some of the things that are just important to you that you might not have been able to put words around. And for me, as somebody with that different kind of brain, it has been really hard for me to know myself well enough to be able to describe things sometimes. And it's very, very frustrating because I can't just sit down and think about it. But in looking at my past photographs, I start to see some of those clues come out. And then it becomes like a science project, which I find fascinating because I love geeky things.
Yeah.
And it's just that I'm collecting all of this evidence and documentation to study myself. And what could be more exciting than that?
Right. So I have a question since you said that. What is your photography pattern? Like, what do you mainly focus on when you take pictures, if you don't mind me asking? Because I can give you my answer after you explain yours, because I could run it down to a T on photographs that I take. But I want to know about the style that you do.
Okay, well, for my subjects, that's a little bit layered because photography is my profession. So I have different subjects depending on who it is that I'm photographing.
Right.
I like typically a lot of contrast in my images. I like things to be very black and white. I prefer black and white. I like shooting film, which is very stereotypically autistic. I'm a black and white thinker. Of gray, but they need to be shades of gray. There can't be like green mixed in and purple, and because too much color throws me off. And it's harder for me to see what's going on in the image. I tend to anchor my subject in the lower right part of the photograph. If you break up the frame into the rule of thirds, my subjects typically live in that lower right dot.
Okay.
I like to have a lot of space in my photographs, so I like for there to be room for the subject to move into. I like things typically to be kind of dark. I do get sometimes some comments from people that say, "Oh, these are horribly underexposed. What are you doing?" That's the way I like it. It's art. I get to do what I want.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
but yeah, I like things to be simple. I like them to be clean. I like it to be obvious what's going on, like not a lot of hidden messages or in between the lines types of things. Another very autistic pattern that shows up in what I create, because life is confusing for me trying to understand people. And so I want to make it very simple for someone to look at something that I create and say, oh, well, yeah, okay. I know where to look in this photograph. I know what's going on. I know my eyes are going to go here first and then to here and here and here, because that's how I set things up.
I like that. You know, I'm a person who I get what, like, how you have your subject set up and where you like to set them and everything. That's a wonderful explanation of what is your muse. I want to know, you know, analysis on me, because I usually always walk up to trees and point the camera like straight up at the tree bark, all the way up to the branches, and I will take photos like that all the time. Like, I don't know how many hundreds, maybe thousands of photos that I have of different trees, and it may be black and white, it may be color, but like the camera is pointed up at the tree with, you know, either the leaves or the bark and everything, just, you know, in full saturation sometimes, maybe in black and white, but that's, I know that's one of my number one things that I take photos of, or like moss on a tree, or like maybe some fungus on a tree, but almost the exact same way. I'm like, when you were talking about that, I was like, ooh, McCall, I can call you out like right there, just like that. I know how you take photos, and that's one of your things.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating. I mean, to me, that says the person that's creating this image is someone that's really interested in seeing things from an unconventional perspective. And it reminds me, as you were talking, I was thinking about Georgia O'Keeffe, who's a painter, primarily. She did do some photography, but her whole thing was, what she was famous for was painting flowers and painting them in these really big portraits, but zooming in on detailed flowers, because she wanted people to take the time to see them, to not just say, oh, there's a flower over there, because then the brain takes over and it has all of these scripts for what is involved in a flower. She wanted to invite people into the flower, to experience it as a whole living being that's beautiful and graceful and elegant and hardworking in its own way. And to do that, to get into the details and to come at it from a perspective that's different than most of us have in our daily lives. And I find that to be so valuable. That is how we learn and improve things, is by approaching them differently.
Wow. That I'm struck. I'm just I have the biggest grin over here. You can't see it, but yeah, I'm just smiling ear to ear right now about what you just explained, because I've seen some of her, paintings about flowers, and it really it makes you just stop and stare and like, well, where's that part of the flower going? What detail, is in it? And I find myself also taking pictures of flowers and getting really close up and just like, if it was a person and I was taking a picture that close, they'd be like, please get out of my personal space. But the
really
flower,
uncomfortable.
but the flowers, doesn't have to say that. I can take however close of a picture of a flower as I can.
And I'm willing to bet that when you have a camera in your hand and you're looking up, you're at the base of the tree and you're looking up into the branches, that you aren't thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow. You're not worried about whether you're doing it right or what anybody else is going to think about it. You're just there with that tree and your camera, and you are creating a story about the tree, which is one of my...
I've seen him, take a picture from like a third person view, and it's definitely, it's how you described it. He's all into it. It's not what happened yesterday or what's going to be happening or what we just did 30 minutes ago or the car ride to get to where he wanted to take the picture at. He's just fully focused on what he can see through that lens and how he can adjust it to every inch. And I have no idea what he does. Best thing I do is take a picture of a flower in a flower pot with my iPhone. I thought it turned it out good, but he's over there taking like 40 pictures of the same thing and like constantly adjusting it until it fits him. Like you said earlier, like an artist's point of view, like he's not satisfied until he gets that one thing that he already imagined the picture should have looked like before he took it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really beautiful things that photography teaches, is that perspective where you may start with a vision of what you think is possible, but at the same time, you're leaving yourself open to all of those possibilities. And when things shift or they don't turn out the way that you expect, instead of saying, well, this sucks, then you adjust. You make changes. You figure out how else you can move yourself around, what camera settings you can change. Maybe you need a change in subject because you have something that you're looking for. You're looking for some sort of connection that happens when you come across that subject and there's a story there. And maybe you're not hitting on that the first 37 times, but maybe the 38th time you do.
You're right. Jeremy and I went on a hike with my family and his family, and there were times where I was like, hey, everybody look at the camera, and I was getting very close to edges and stuff, like cliff faces, and I'm like, no, but I have to get the shot. Like, it has to, I want everybody looking at the camera. I want to be, as far over as I can possibly be without falling off this edge. Yeah. But like,
I'll rappel down and get the memory card out, I guess, whenever he falls off the cliff, and we'll see how good of a shot it was.
Oh, that sounds very relatable.
We'll start getting climbing gear, I guess, the next time we go hiking, just for him to take pictures.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I enjoy the way you describe that, because that's me to a T. Like I just get immersed into the subject of whatever, and I'm sure, as you explain, you do too, and that's kind of the way you allow yourself to actually, be who you are and show who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And
There's no one to stop you.
well,
It's you and your camera.
Yeah, it's you fully communicating. When you produce the shots that you do, you're fully communicating yourself. This is where my mind went. This is how I think. This is who I am. And that's why I took those photos. I was there in the moment doing that.
Yeah, and that's Ansel Adams said something like that about the photography, that the photographer is always in the photograph.
Wow.
You cannot see the photographer in the conventional sense of seeing someone, but the photographer is always in the photograph, because you can set up, and there's some really neat experiments about this online, where there's a group of maybe 10 or 15 photographers, and they're all tasked with photographing the same subject in the same place. And every one of them has a very different approach to doing it. So you're looking at the same subject, but it's like a completely different world when you're looking at each photographer's work. So that photographer is making choices that are a reflection of who the photographer is. So we think that, I got into photography because I had been told my whole childhood that I was terrible at art and that I would never be an artist. And now I'm a professional photographer and painter. So take that, art teachers.
You did better. You did better than me, because in my art class in high school, apparently everything I drew turned out looking like Michael Jackson. I don't know. Like, I wasn't trying, but they're just like, that looks like Michael Jackson. I was like, if you say so. Do I get an A or not? It's art class.
Oh, well, what I'm trying to say is that, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought, because now I'm thinking about Michael Jackson.
Oh, my bad. I didn't think it was going to derail us that much.
That's quite all right. What you said deeply moved me, apparently. But that we, photography. Why I chose photography as a place to start was because I could approach it initially very scientifically. And this is something that I think is important to mention because of anxiety and depression, where it feels like, for me, that it's a really squiggly, fuzzy line between the science and the art of it. We know things about what happens to brains that are depressed or anxious, and how they are structurally different and connected differently than brains that aren't depressed or anxious. And still, there's just a whole lot of the pervasive culture that says, well, if you try meditation, or if you eat floured sandwiches while you're swimming underwater, then things are going to clear up and get better. And it doesn't work that way. So for me, being able to create art from a scientific point of view, looking at the physics of light, was really what got me. And it's just become this thing that now when I teach photography, I don't start with the technical stuff. I start with introducing people to recognizing how they're feeling, to noticing where their attention goes, to paying attention to what they're curious about, and then figuring out, what is the story here? What kind of connection do I have? And how does all of this matter? What do I want to say about this? Because it's not me taking a photograph, it's me telling a story about the subject. And then the technical stuff can happen. Then the technical stuff helps. But until you have the idea of what it is that you want to create, why you're holding a camera in the first place, the physics doesn't matter. And so I came into it being very scientific and wound up almost completely reversing that. And I think that that makes it, when I'm showing other people, I think that makes it more accessible in a lot of ways, because the technical stuff can be pretty intimidating. That's why I decided to not start with painting. I thought, well, somebody's already told me that I sucked at that. So I maybe not do that anymore.
That's crazy the way you described all that about how you see the artist or you see the photographer in the photo. That kind of gave me chill bumps thinking now. Every time I want to look at a photo, I'm always going to look at it from the photographer's standpoint and what he was actually thinking. And, you know, could he have just went through a divorce? You know, could he have lost a child? You know, did a daughter get married the day before? You know, and I mean, it's just like all the things that I guess I've never really put into account. And like you said, you can see the actual person, but you can't see them.
What she sees,
Right.
what he sees, what they see, what, you know, what anybody,
It's crazy.
What perspective that person has put, you know, themselves through that photo, and like
It'll never be the same.
it'll never be the same. Yeah.
No matter who did it, even if the same person went back the next day, the photo would look differently because he would be in a different train of thought then. And that's something, I don't know why that's so simple to think or to know, but I just never thought of it that way. That is insane.
Yeah, and to be able to record that in your own life as you're going through on days that are perfectly normal, when you're feeling pretty emotionally balanced and steady, and on days where it feels like everything's in upheaval and you don't know how you're going to make it to the end of the day. You have this record that you can create for yourself. It doesn't have to be anything extraordinary. It could be what you ate for lunch, or the patina that's on your door handle from years of use, or, you know, it could be any little thing. It's just that you are going to photograph the things that are most interesting to you. You are going to follow your curiosity. And when you give yourself permission to do that in photographs, I think you give yourself permission to do that for yourself, because what you see in the world that's drawing you in is a reflection of what is in you, what is interesting in you. And then when you look at the photograph later, you're going to see that and take it in, and you may not have been able to do that before.
Right. And you know, thinking of that you could be also, you know, any of your students, you could be helping out, you know, that could be their therapy of you teaching them how to, you know, take photographs and look at things from different perspectives, and they never tell you that, but that could be their form of therapy, you know, of you showing them, look at this from a different perspective, or, you know, try this different light, or see it from this point of view. Maybe
You're basically teaching someone about themselves that
Yes.
they've never experienced before, no matter what age they're at, before they even, like you said, get into the technical part of the camera.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, just how do you, it's a wonderful tool for understanding how you see the world. And I think that's what I discovered when I started turning towards my camera as a tool for the really hard days, whether it was because of grief or because of anxiety or because of depression. When I felt like the world was just too much for me, I would pick up my camera, and it gave me the opportunity to not disengage from the situation, because I'm accused of that sometimes. Well, you're just picking up your camera to disassociate. Well, it's kind of sort of true, but not really, because in picking up my camera, I have to pay closer attention to what's going on. So it may seem like there's this barrier between me and what's happening in the world, but really looking at things through my viewfinder means that there's a greater demand of intimacy between me and the subject, between me and whatever is happening here. There is more intimacy, not less. And understanding that was a really big thing for me. So now it is just such a normal thing for me when I'm having a hard time to pick up the camera. Any camera will do. It doesn't matter to me what it is. If it's film, if it's my phone, if it's a DSLR, I don't care. I just pick up a camera, and holding it in front of my face, because this is my job and I'm so well trained to do this, it just puts me in the state of mind where I think, oh, now I am a witness. Witnessing is my job. I pay attention, I follow my curiosity, I notice what strikes me, and I tell the story about that. And I get out of my head. I become part of what's happening in a very delicious, kind of slow way, where it seems like everything has slowed down, even if the pace of things is very, very fast. I need that for my brain.
And, people listening in, I hope that maybe if, everybody who will listen into this episode gains something, even if they only take pictures with their iPhone or their Android, or if they are, professional photographers such as yourself, they can get something. Even, somebody who currently might not be a photographer, somebody who doesn't really like using their phone, may get something out of this, or something that you have said, Shannon, because I have definitely, out of this episode, gained a lot of perspective and understanding from myself, and being able to understand why and how I do these things. So I thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
Jeremy, do you have any?
I'm just in awe. I looked at the time, and like, it's one of my favorite episodes apparently, because time has flew by. And since you mentioned that about people I guess I'll probably buy stock in like some camera stocks or something, because I feel like some people are going to go buy cameras after this episode releases. Maybe I can make myself rich off of that.
I mean, that's what we're after. We want to have that experience where we're not aware of time, because that's, I mean, for me, so much of what I have a hard time with is getting hung up in social expectations and constraints and things like that aren't really a part of a full, wonderful life. And photography allows me to separate from that and to be in what's really happening. So I guess it's appropriate that we lost track of time.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I have no complaints on that. Since we're here at the tail end, did you want to plug in do you have any socials, a website or anything to maybe see some of your photography? Or?
Well, sure. My primary photography business is called Slobbered Lens. I photograph mostly animals. I do other things as well, but that's the biggest presence that I have online. And that's exactly like it sounds, like somebody drooled on your camera lens. Instagram and Facebook, and there's a website which is going to be refreshed very soon. And if you go to either Instagram or Facebook, you will see some information about courses and things. And there's one in particular, it's a little ebook, it's called The Anxious Photographer.
Okay.
And it's some of the exercises that I use when I pull out my phone and I'm having a hard time and I'm just looking for, how do I move back to center? Not how do I overcome this or how do I fix it, but how do I get back to center so that I can wobble around and not fall over?
Yeah.
So just very practical things that you can keep on your phone so that when you're having a hard time, you can pull them up and there they are. But there's some other stuff too, and there's lots of stories and photos and art and things like that. You can look at that and give the fist to my art teachers that told me I was no good.
I have no problem doing that. And of course, we'll have, for everyone listening, we'll have all of her links and everywhere you can find all those things attached with all of the websites and all of our socials as well to make it easier to find. Do you have anything else to add, Shannon?
It was such a delight talking with you. I'm so happy to talk about brains. We need to talk about more and how to take care of ourselves and how to take care of each other. And it's not about having more spa days, it's kind of gritty emotional stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just so grateful for what you're doing.
Well,
we thank you.
If you'll stay on the line, I'll do the outro and we'll talk afterwards, okay?
Sounds good.
Fantastic. So we would like to thank Shannon MacFarlane for coming on tonight's episode, whenever you're listening, of course. I'm McCall.
And I'm Jeremy.
And we hope you like this episode. Make sure to go check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all those social medias as well. And we'll talk to y'all next time.